Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Crowley House Flower Farm and Studio. Today I am seeding up one of the most beautiful summer flowers and one of the most, I would say, requested flowers for summer weddings. And that is the hard to grow, or at least it has a reputation for it, the Lisianthus. Voila! Okay, so Lisianthus are one of those flowers that are just stunning. I think the reason for that is, one, they have a very long vase life, and two, they kind of look like a rose without being a rose. Now, they have the most amazing colors, which are also kind of the pastels, purples, dark brown. They have peaches and salmon and all kinds of things, but all of them are very romantic colors. They get a bad rap because they can be a long germination period. They grow, they start up, and then they just kind of sit there and stall. And so a lot of things can happen during that time. One being you forget them and they dry out and all that kind of stuff. The growing situation maybe gets off a little bit and you have all kinds of things happen. So it's one of those that can be challenging for a lot of folks. Now the seed also is extremely small. Now these come from Johnny's seed, and I don't know if it will focus on this. In this little bottle is the seeds, and they're pelleted, which is really nice. There's about 50 of them in here, and the little yellow round dots are the seed coated in a coating. So we're gonna seed up some. I have a few varieties that we got in to give a go at. We have Voyager 2 White, then we have a Champagne, a Voyager Champagne, and then a Crowley Pink. The tray that I have here is just a Rosetta 2, which is a really pretty white one. We use a lot of white in weddings. That's probably our most requested floral for especially designers and stuff. When we're selling to a wholesaler, we'll sell a lot of them. I feel like the market's kind of flooded with Lisianthus ranunculus and a few other things that people just, if you order them in, they're not easy to grow from seed, but if you order them in plug trays, then they are fairly easy to grow. And so a lot of farmers are just growing them in mass, and so the market gets a little bit flooded. So the price that you can demand is not the best. So we don't grow that many of them, just because I try and watch to see what other people are growing. Like dahlias are a big thing right now, so we don't grow that many dahlias, and then that whole thing will fade out. So it's like trends, you know. Heirloom mums used to be a huge rage, and then everybody was growing them, and then you're just like, I used to be the only person growing them, and now it's just like everybody's doing it, you know. So it's kind of, I don't grow as many now. I just grow enough for our weddings, and then I just try and grow things that will sell really well to our florists that nobody has. So it's kind of my little tidbit that if you're struggling, you put in a big crop, say you're a farmer, and you're struggling to get it sold, just maybe not put in as many. Next year, grow them for yourself or change it up a little bit. Okay, so I thought I would talk through some of the things that Lisianthus can kind of, some of the troubleshooting with them, things that can happen, bug pressure, growing them on, things like that really quickly with you, and then I'm gonna get to planting up. So I'm only doing a few this year. They're all from Johnny's. So I have about 150 seeds that we're sowing up today. I also thought I would sow up some Feverfew really quickly, but I mainly wanted to focus on Lisianthus today and just chat that through with you guys. Just, you know, because everybody's starting their Lisianthus right now. So I think the biggest thing to know is that the challenge with growing Lisianthus from seed is that they have a long period before they germinate and grow on to the point that they can actually be sown out into the garden. So things can happen. You can, you know, just by paying attention to the seed and just knowing that they're going to be taking their time and put them somewhere where you're going to see them every day and just kind of baby them, then they're going to be great. I think that's one reason why they are kind of expensive, is that they do take a little bit more babysitting than other plants. So there's different groups of seeds, and basically of Lisianthus. So you can have group 1 would be in spring, where you have limited light and it's a little bit cooler. Group 2 would be grown in the summertime for harvest in the summer and fall when the light is a little bit higher up, or you have daylight length is longer and it's hotter. out as well. Group 3 is similar to group 1 in where the light is less, the temperatures are cooler, and therefore the day length is less. So that's kind of what those 1, 2, and 3 mean when you're buying seeds or buying starts. If you're looking for plugs and you're just a home gardener, I would check out Bailey's plugs. They sell to the public as well as farmers in smaller quantities generally, sometimes in full. They're a little more expensive, but if you want them pre-started for you and you want just amazing Lisianthus in your garden this year, I'd suggest checking both of them out. Lisianthus are generally, for us, an annual, partly because we are a little bit cooler here. If you were from the Southwest, they would perennialize for you there. Here, I find that even though they'll stay and come back next year for us in the hoop houses, that it's just, it's just not worth it. And I think crop rotation on that crop for me is key. And so it just pays for me to redo every single year. I like to grow in a greenhouse or some sort of cover for these because a lot of times the water spots on, especially here in the Pacific Northwest where we get a lot of rain, the water spots on it can create just some bruising and issues with the petals of the florals not looking so great. So we like to definitely grow them in the greenhouse. You can also do a low tunnel if you're out in like a smaller farm or you want to plant some outside. A lot of people do that. And some people where you don't have a lot of rain, which actually here in the Pacific Northwest, we kind of dry out from June until September. So we tend to have drier spells, and so a lot of people do grow them out in the field as a field production. Just because we do a lot of weddings, I don't do that. We just grow them. We just make room for them here in the greenhouse. So Lisianthus like a soil pH of a 6.5 to a 7. I just always put down a good generous amount of compost before I plant them with a little bit of just an all-purpose fertilizer that goes down, and I tend to do fine with that. Some people go ahead and test your soil, and I'd say do that if you're going to be, mass planting, because I don't grow very many. A lot of times we will do a generalized soil test every once in a while, but not all the time, and our soil tends to be pretty good, especially here in the greenhouse. For watering, I would say go ahead and use that drip irrigation line so that the water spots, the overhead irrigation doesn't ruin those beautiful blooms. So you've worked really hard to get them that far, and then just to have them look not so great, I would highly suggest doing some sort of drip line irrigation for them. Also, the mulch keeps the roots nice and cool, especially when you're growing in a high tunnel. You can get some high heat in there, and by using some sort of compost or something like that around the roots or black plastic, some people prefer to do that, and we do have that here in the greenhouse. That helps. In order to have a long succession of beautiful blooms throughout the season, we like to stagger ours. So we have, some already grown that we order in plugs, and then we always start seed. It is mid-February, so I'm starting seed now. You could start them as early as January or December and then grow them on. So it's just when you plant them and then when you plant them out into the garden. So if you get some of those, like we were talking about, the class 1, 2, and 3, planting them out in different times, then you're going to have continuous blooms, which is really hard to do, but nice to do, especially if you're a production farmer. So when you're sowing, you're always thinking, I need to sow these about 12 to 13 weeks prior to when they go out into the ground. So that is a long time to babysit some plants. I don't know about you, but a lot of things can happen, and I have lost my Lisianthus before because I wasn't paying attention. So this year I am deciding to actually take them home to the Orchard Heights place, and they're going to be in a very controlled area where it's the perfect temperature for them, and I'm going to see them every single day, several times a day. So germination usually takes about 10 to 15 days, and you want the soil temperature or the temperature of the room that you have them in to be about 65 to 75 degrees. In your home, under lights, is the perfect condition. I am going to be using a humidity dome over the top of them until I see them start germinating, and that will really help keep that soil moisture just perfect, because Lisianthus like the soil just moist enough but not soggy. So keeping that balance is hard. I'm also going to put a fan on to encourage air movement and flow so that we don't run into some fungal issues. So a couple things to think about is when you're seeding these and you do have that long period, Lisianthus don't like it too warm and they don't like it too cold. So keeping that temperature right there at that sweet spot of about 75 degrees with a fan going is really going to help. Because one of the things that you can have happen if your temperatures get up past 75, like say 80, 85, somewhere in there, you can get what's called rosetting. And that means basically that the plant doesn't want to grow upwards or create that stem or elongate. So it's just going to stay really short and compact, and you're going to get just little blooms starting really low down. And it's just doesn't work for a cut flower farmer or in your garden when you want that beautiful show of those beautiful blooms just ruffling along in your borders. So just keeping the nighttime temperatures around 55 also will help, which in the greenhouse here is pretty controlled like that. It never gets really that cold in here. We do have our heater that's working now, amen, and we can control that temperature when it drops really low. But just because I want to keep a really close eye on them, I'm going to take them home and I know what temperature it is there, and we can kind of keep control of that there. So once rosetting starts, it's really hard to control it and to reverse it, but you can, if you can, put them where it is cool outside and at 50 degrees or somewhere cooler, and sometimes that will help. Doesn't always. Just telling you from experience. Okay, some of the other problems that you can have with Lisianthus is, you know, the water spotting. Whitefly can be a big issue with them and leave little nibbles, or not nibbles, but just dings in your flowers. We've also had thrip. I don't know if anybody else has had that problem, but we've had thrip, which also leaves little nicks, especially the darker colored Lisianthus can have that. So the lighter ones don't show it as much as the dark ones, like the purples and the beautiful pinks and darker colors. Definitely will show this like splotching. And then you can have aphids. So aphids you could use like neem oil or soap and water or things like that to keep them under control. I don't tend to have that so much here. If you did have a problem with it, that's kind of how we take care of it. We have it on other things, like ranunculus can sometimes have it for us, or anemones early in the spring, sometimes even sweet peas. That's how I lost them the very first time I grew them. I just didn't know. You can also have some fungal issues with them sometimes, I've noticed, especially growing underneath a hoop house. So just kind of paying attention to them once they start blooming, kind of looking at them every day. I know I take my coffee outside or tea or whatever I'm drinking and walk the farm just to look for bug problems or any fungal issues. But Lisianthus tend to be similar to like a carnation, where they're pretty dang tough, and once they get established and doing their thing. The other thing I'd highly recommend is crop rotation, and whether you're a flower farmer or you are just growing in your regular garden, crop rotation is something that you should think about. And that's the fun part about being just a gardener, is that you can move things around and play with colors and textures and different things. And maybe you grow Lisianthus one year and you love it or you hate it, but then the next year you're growing something else that's going to replace that in your drifts or your show flowers or whatever it is. So it's kind of fun. So I'm going to get to seeding up really quick, and it should go pretty quickly since they're all pelleted. So I have 3 packets of seeds that I'm going to be sowing. So I went ahead, these are 72 cell trays. On the package it says to do a 288 cell, which I'm not going to do that just because this is what I have. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know. Anyway, so I went ahead and filled them with a seed starting mix, which is a little bit finer than a regular, and partly because I had it. If you didn't have this, I would just say go ahead and use what you have, as long as it doesn't have like a lot of wood chunk. Light required to germinate seed. So I'm going to use a little bit of vermiculite on top, and then I'm going to cover them with a dome, and then I'll pop them underneath the lights, even though they probably don't need it. I just have the lights on anyways down in the basement, and it's not going to hurt anything. So I'm going to get to seeding. Kind of wanting to hang on in there. They're like magnetized, or have a lot of, you know, when you rub a balloon on your head, I'll have to get the rest of them out in a minute. I'll start with these. Nice and bright and yellow, which is really nice. And it says to put 1 seed per tray. Now to use a smaller cell tray, like a 288 or something like that, that would help on just the cost of it being the savings of, you know, you're not using as much soil. But in my case, I'm okay with doing it this way. It's just less work for me later on. Off I go, just seeding away. Well, I tell you guys, these seeds are little itty bitty, so it's super nice that they're pelleted. That's that bright yellow little speck there. I did go through and gently just kind of make sure that the seed was in contact with the soil pretty well. So I just gently kind of tapped like that. So now what I'm going to do is take these and go ahead and put a little bit of vermiculite on top, and then put a dome over them and call it good. So I'm just doing a very light amount of vermiculite on it. And that's just going to aid in helping keep the fungal problems down. And also there can be like it's like a hard crust on top. And that can also deter your plants from growing super well because there's this hard crust on top. So it helps with both of those things. You can find vermiculite at any like hardware store, anything like that. It's a very fine, pumicey, kind of spongy, almost like a cork feel to it, but it's really nice. We use it a lot to kind of help with just the fungus issues that can create on top of your soil or your plants. So it's really kind of cool. Well, that seeded out really easy. I am excited to see how well they do. They have done okay for me in the past, but this year I have higher hopes. All right, well, I ended up getting my 1 tray of Feverfew done and then 1 of Dianthus. Now, Feverfew is similar, really tiny seeds, and it kind of has the same growing habit as a Lisianthus, although I have to say Feverfew is much easier to grow. So I went ahead and seeded that up, and I have another tray of it ready to go out. So this is a second succession of it. Yeah, it'll be great. So Feverfew is one of those flowers that like it a little bit cooler. We can actually grow it year-round outside, and it does great. I just wanted a fresh batch that we're putting out. I have 1 other tray that's ready to go, and I'll show you what that looks like. So it's just gorgeous, gorgeous. Now this is going to go outside. We're going to cover it with a low tunnel hoop here in a little bit. But yep, that's what it's going to look like just shortly. Okay, so what I'm doing now is getting ready to plant these little Lisianthus. Aren't they cute? So we are going to be planting them, but what I'm going to do is go ahead and dip this in some just very weak fertilizer. You can use Root Shield as well. Some people do that just because there is some diseases and stuff like that that these little guys can get, and that just ensures a little better success. I do not have any, so we are just going to use a fish emulsion, very lightly diluted, dip it in, and then plant it along with our soil itself. Has a little bit of bone meal and some fertilizer in it, and so it should give these guys a great little start. A lot of times what I normally do would be, when I'm planting mass amounts, is the BioTone starter. Now I'll use that in my garden as well as flower farming, and that's what we're doing today. But so when I do it on mass production, I will use the BioTone starter, and I'll mix that into the soil a little bit and then plant my plants right in. And I find that that actually works really well. I do not have any today. Couldn't find it at the store. We're ordering it in, so this is what we have today, this routine. So like any flower farmer, you kind of make it up on the go, and for some reason it always turns out, and then there's the day it doesn't.